There are moments in life when everything around us seems to fall apart. Goals that once felt so clear become blurred, and what we pursued with so much effort loses its shine. Who hasn't wondered in a moment of doubt, am I living the life I truly want, or am I just following a script that isn't mine? These questions don't arise by chance. They echo a deeper truth, a call that resonates within us, inviting us to look in the mirror and face the only person who truly matters on this journey: ourselves. Carl Jung, one of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century, said that life actually begins at 40. Not because the years before that don't matter, but because the early years serve as a training ground, a period of learning and identity building. But what if I told you that finding yourself has no age limit? What Jung called individuation can happen at any stage, as long as we are willing to confront our own masks and shadows. Finding oneself is not a magical event or an instant revelation. It is a process that often begins with small discomforts. It might be the unease of a monotonous routine, a strained relationship, or the feeling of living on autopilot. As unpleasant as it may be, that discomfort is also a gift. It forces us to question the narrative we have told ourselves, to reevaluate the choices we have made, and to realize that perhaps we are walking a path we never truly chose. But how do we know if we are on the right path? And more importantly, how do we begin to create a path that is truly our own? Imagine that each of us wears a mask, not a mask for disguise or deception, but a representation of the expectations the world has of us. This mask, which Carl Jung called the persona, is like a social armor, something we develop from a young age to navigate the complexities of life. It is the way we present ourselves to the world, shaped by influences such as family, culture, religion, and environment. In our early years, we are like sponges, absorbing beliefs, values, and behaviors that help us gain acceptance and validation from those around us. We are praised for acting in certain ways, encouraged to follow specific paths, and often pressured to ignore parts of ourselves that do not fit the mold. Over time, the persona strengthens, becoming not just a tool for adaptation, but for many, an invisible prison. Jung believed that this construction was necessary. Without the persona, it would be impossible to function in society. It gives us the tools to build careers, establish relationships, and fulfill responsibilities. However, as time goes on, this mask can start to suffocate us. We begin to confuse the persona with our true essence, believing that we are only what we show to the world. And that is when cracks begin to appear. These cracks often emerge during moments of crisis. Maybe you are living someone else's dream, the career your parents idealized, the relationship that looks perfect to your friends, or the lifestyle that follows society's norms. On the surface, everything seems in place, but inside, there is an emptiness. This happens because the persona, no matter how polished, can never fully reflect who we truly are. As we grow older, the discomfort with this mask can intensify. The persona that once seemed so effective begins to limit our growth. We feel trapped in roles that no longer represent us. The successful professional who is exhausted, the loving partner who has lost connection, the friend who always says yes out of fear of rejection. At this point, the question arises: who am I beyond this mask? This is the beginning of a search for authenticity. It is the moment we realize there are parts of ourselves we have left behind, hidden beneath the mask of the persona. And to truly find ourselves, we must have the courage to question this construction. To uncover who we truly are, we must be willing to peel away the layers of expectations that have shaped us. This is not an easy task. It requires us to face uncomfortable truths, to challenge beliefs we once held as absolute, and to step away from the comfort of familiar roles. But removing the mask is just the beginning. Because once we do, we come face to face with something even more unsettling, our shadow. Carl Jung described the shadow as the hidden side of our psyche, the part of ourselves that we repress, deny, or pretend does not exist. It consists of our fears, desires, insecurities, and even qualities we underestimate or refuse to acknowledge. The shadow is not inherently bad. It simply contains everything we have pushed aside because it didn't fit the version of ourselves that we present to the world. Why are we so afraid of our shadow? Perhaps because from a young age, we are taught to show only our best side. We hear phrases like, "Don't cry," "Be strong." That's not acceptable. Little by little, we learn that certain emotions, anger, sadness, vulnerability, are not welcomed. So we push them down, hiding them in an emotional basement, hoping they will disappear. But what we ignore does not vanish. It waits for the right moment to manifest itself. Confronting the shadow is uncomfortable because it forces us to acknowledge our contradictions. We can be generous, yet selfish, courageous, yet full of fear. We want to be loved, yet we fear rejection. These conflicting aspects of ourselves scare us because they challenge the identity we have carefully constructed. But as Jung suggested, only by accepting our shadow can we become whole. Facing our shadow is not an act of defeat. It is an act of courage. Imagine someone finally admitting they have a deep fear of failure. Instead of seeing it as a weakness, they realize that beneath that fear lies a genuine desire to grow. Or someone who acknowledges their envy, only to understand that it points to something they secretly aspire to achieve. The shadow, as terrifying as it may seem, is a doorway to self-discovery. When we confront it, it stops being a hidden monster and becomes an integrated part of who we are. It's important to remember that this process is not something we must do alone. Sharing our vulnerabilities with trusted people or seeking support from a therapist can make the journey more manageable. The shadow thrives in isolation, but it loses its power when exposed to the light. Accepting our hidden parts does not mean fixing something broken within us. On the contrary, it is a recognition that we are human, light and darkness coexisting within us. And by embracing those parts, we discover a freedom that goes beyond external validation. It is the freedom to be ourselves without masks, without filters. Confronting our shadow places us at a crucial point on the path to self-discovery, the process of individuation. Jung described individuation as the journey toward wholeness, the integration of all parts of ourselves, light and shadow, logic and intuition, mask and essence. It is the moment when we stop trying to be what the world expects of us and start being who we truly are. But what does it mean to awaken our true self? Simply put, it means stepping out of autopilot and beginning to live with intention. It is about discovering what truly matters beyond the layers of expectations we have accumulated throughout our lives. This process is not linear, nor does it happen peacefully. In fact, individuation often begins with a crisis, a feeling that life has lost its spark, that we are trapped in a repetitive cycle, or that our once cherished goals now feel empty. These crises can be terrifying, but they are also invitations for deep change. It's as if life is asking us to pause, to look inward and to ask ourselves, who am I really? And more importantly, what do I truly want? The answers to these questions are not found in success manuals or in the well-intentioned advice of others. They are within us, waiting to be discovered. Individuation does not mean rejecting everything we have built so far. On the contrary, it is a process of redefinition, of looking at our past choices and recognizing which ones were made out of fear or a need for approval, and which ones genuinely reflect our deepest values. It is a journey to reconnect with our forgotten dreams, our passions, buried under the weight of daily responsibilities. As we align more with our true selves, we begin to feel a renewed sense of freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever we want without consequence, but the freedom to live authentically. Decisions that once seemed impossible, changing careers, ending a relationship, reevaluating friendships, start to make more sense because they are guided by what truly nourishes us. On this path, we also discover that authenticity does not mean perfection. Quite the opposite. It means embracing our imperfections as part of what makes us unique. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and whole, we realize that authenticity is what truly connects us with others. It is not our mask of success or perfection that inspires, but our courage to be real. This awakening of the true self is transformative, not because we become something we weren't before, but because we begin to live as who we have always been. It is a return to the essential, to the genuine, to the meaningful. Finding yourself and awakening your true self is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a life that finally makes sense. When we integrate all parts of who we are and begin to live with authenticity, something surprising happens. We find freedom. Not the kind of freedom we imagined in our youth, the one that means doing whatever we want, but the kind of freedom that comes from living with purpose, from aligning our actions with what we truly value. Living with purpose does not mean having all the answers or following a perfectly structured plan. In fact, it is quite the opposite. It is accepting that life is dynamic, full of uncertainties, and that our role is not to control it, but to make conscious decisions that reflect who we are. It is living according to our values, even when that means going against the current. Think about the feeling of making a decision from the heart, rather than from the expectations of others. Maybe it's saying no to an opportunity that doesn't resonate with you, or finally, investing time in something you've always wanted to do, but kept postponing. Those moments of alignment are liberating because they remind us that life is not about following a model. It is about creating our own path. But this freedom does not come without challenges. Often, living with purpose means letting go of ideas, relationships, or habits that no longer serve us. It is natural to feel fear in this process, fear of failure, of disappointing others, of feeling lost. However, it is important to remember that the freedom to be ourselves does not mean the absence of difficulties, but the courage to face them, knowing that we are living our inner truth. As we embrace this new way of living, our relationships also change. We begin to attract people who share similar values, who inspire and support us. We become more selective with our time and energy, prioritizing what truly brings us joy and meaning. And in doing so, we realize that living with purpose is not just about big transformations. It is also about small, daily choices that reflect who we are. Living with purpose is not about achieving a grand goal or reaching a final destination. It's about making choices, day by day, that reflect who we truly are. It's about honoring our deepest values, even in the smallest actions. Another crucial aspect of this freedom is acceptance. Living with purpose does not mean we will never experience doubt or difficult days. On the contrary, it means embracing the imperfections of life while still finding meaning in them. When we adopt this perspective, we stop seeking happiness in external achievements and begin to find it in the simple act of being present, of staying true to ourselves. That is the beauty of living with purpose. Every step, no matter how small, becomes a reflection of who we are. And when we look back, we realize that the choices that once seemed difficult led us to a life that truly belongs to us. Not because it was perfectly planned or idealized, but because it was lived authentically. And something even more profound happens when we free ourselves from external expectations and begin to live in alignment with our purpose. We discover that our life is not just about us. It has the potential to impact others, to inspire, to leave a legacy. This legacy does not have to be grand or revolutionary. It can be found in the small imprints we leave in the world and in the lives of those around us. Leaving a personal legacy does not mean seeking recognition or fame. It means living in a way that reflects our values and inspires authenticity. It is about the decisions we make, the connections we nurture, and the meaning we bring to our actions. Often the impact we leave on the world is invisible. It is in a kind word, in an act of generosity, in the courage to live a true life that serves as an example to others. Think of someone who has deeply inspired you. It could be a mentor, a friend, or even an author whose words resonated with you. What made them so special was not their achievements or possessions, but the integrity with which they lived. They left a legacy because they remained true to themselves, and that is what made them unforgettable. When we choose to live this way, we create a similar impact, often without even realizing it. This legacy is also reflected in how we face adversity. Life will never be completely free of challenges, but what matters is how we choose to respond to them. By facing our fears, accepting our shadows, and living with purpose, we show others that they can do the same. It is a way of telling the world, no matter how difficult it is, you can find strength within yourself. Creating a personal legacy also means understanding that it will continue even after we are gone. Our actions resonate over time, shaping the lives of those we touch. It can be as simple as teaching a child self-love or sharing a story that inspires a friend.